What kind of speed should you be using when you're executing a bench press? Should it be intentionally slower, or should we be moving as fast as possible? We're gonna figure this out today, and we're gonna start right now. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about is that when I see strength coaches doing intentionally slow concentric movements, so think about a bench press, okay, coming down and then pressing very slowly, intentionally, not because the load is very heavy, but because they're following a specific tempo. I see this and I just try to think through, what are they doing this for? Why are they doing this? Is there some specific type of adaptation? Is there a reason why they're doing this? Even if we're doing a back squat, let's say you do a 4-second eccentric on a back squat and then you push back up, but you purposely go slower. Let's say you're just going 3 seconds back to the top on purpose. One of the thought processes, or one of the things that ends up happening, is you feel like it's really, really hard, right? This is very, very challenging. And you might think that you're breaking through some type of plateau. You might think that, okay, maybe I'm gonna get a little bit bigger. I'm under tension for a longer period of time. I have greater time under tension, right? So you might start to focus on that intentional concentric movement actually being slower instead of being as aggressive as possible. So what we wanted to do is actually analyze, what does the research say? How can we look at the science and see what the actual evidence shows us when we're comparing the speed of execution from these specific reps? So fortunately for us, Fry and Hermes have released the intentionally slow concentric velocity resistance exercise and strength adaptations paper. Okay, this is an entire meta-analysis. This was just released in August of 2023. Okay, so this is a brand new paper that goes in depth over, okay, what does intentionally slow concentric velocity resistance exercise do for strength adaptations? And it's a really, really in-depth meta-analysis. And if we can think about meta-analysis as taking a whole bunch of papers, making sure that they follow through or they follow into some specific guidelines, looking at these guidelines and saying, okay, this is the guidelines that we're using that have to fall in line with this. And then what type of result do we find based off of these specific guidelines? So we're gonna go through this simple abstract to provide you with that simple review. And one of the things here is that this is the document here. If you want the full paper, we'll put a link down below. You can find this on PubMed from the Journal of Strength and Conditioning, and they go into crazy, crazy depth. And one of the things that I love about papers like this is when they go through and they say, okay, these are the papers that we actually are pulling from. These are the aspects of the papers that you can look at, because then it's just this crazy dive into the depths of research specifically for sports performance. So then you just get sort of lost. I love doing that, especially if it's on the weekend, in the evening, and my kids aren't awake, obviously. Okay, so now let's go into this. In 2023, they're looking at, this is the part I'm gonna complain about, intentionally slow velocity resistance exercise, ISVRE for short, is suggested by some to be equally or more effective than fast or traditional velocities for increasing muscular strength. So let's say I'm benching, come down, and I push up. That's gonna be a traditional movement pattern, right? Boom. Okay, but now if I come down and I control it on the way back up, this would be ISVRE, intentionally slow. I'm moving it slow on purpose. And the reason being, again, most of the time it comes back to time under tension. People see time under tension. What's an easy way to increase time under tension? Push a little bit slower on the way up. Some people have argued with me as well that if I can control that speed on the way up, that means I should actually be able to recruit more than if you're moving it fast. So we're gonna see, is that true? And so this is suggested by some to increase muscular strength. The purpose of this meta-analysis was to assess the effect of the intentionally slow velocity resistance exercise. So what does that have? What are these strength adaptations? They're looking at different subgroups. They're exploring the age of individuals, the gender, training status, as well as confounding factors on the influence of velocity on strength adaptation. So they had 24 eligible studies. So they're breaking down 24 eligible studies right here. Okay, eligible studies, 24. So that's a big big number. They were required to be multiple weeks. They had to be randomized or non-randomized comparative studies using dynamic constant external resistance for training and testing. So some type of dynamic constant external resistance, a barbell for training and testing. They had to have a pre-strength assessment and then a post-strength assessment. So multiple different weeks. They test you in the beginning, they test you at the end. What's the results of those theories that they have or those exercises that they're putting into play? So that's a pretty easy, simple start. All studies examined healthy individuals. Okay, so now we're excluding anybody who's got an injury. So if we're looking at somebody's banged up from a torn ACL, this actual response has to be thrown out the window. Yes, you can jump to some conclusions, but in all reality, if we're specifically thinking about someone's recovering from some type of surgery or some type of injury, don't use this paper for the most part. Okay, that's typically what I would recommend. They're looking at 625 total individuals, 306 trained fast or traditional, 319 of them trained intentionally slow. So almost an even split there. That's great. Almost an exact even split. Random effects meta-analysis indicated a significant effect in favor of fast training. So we're getting into this right away. They had a random effects meta-analysis indicated a significant effect in favor of fast training. So with big confidence interval, publication bias was noted through trim and fill analysis with an adjusted effect size estimate of 0.32. So before we get into that subgroup analysis, if we can immediately just answer this here. So effect in favor of fast training. So basically all of these studies here, okay, and you're gonna see what was untrained, what was trained. You can see that in the document. All of these studies here, what was slow, what was fast over here, you're gonna be able to see by comparing over 300 different individuals on this side, comparing 300 different individuals on this side. If you want to increase strength, it is more effective to think or to actually move the weight fast. And I want to just quote my probably favorite sports performance quotes from R.A. Roman. He was a weightlifting coach from Russia, and he said that, you know, one of the things he would always say, there's a big difference between moving heavy weight and moving heavy weight fast. And essentially, if you can move heavy weight fast, you're going to be really strong. And if you can move heavy weight fast, that's a characteristic known as impulse if the time continuum is equal between the two groups. If I have a squat here and a squat here and it's the exact same load, but I can finish the squat on this side, this athlete finishes faster, they have greater impulse expression and in turn will likely be a better athlete. So this is sort of upholding based off of this research. If you move bars faster, if you move implements faster, you will be stronger. Okay, now let's get into this a little bit more with the subgroups. So let's look at the subgroup analysis. Indicated no difference between trained and untrained subject, the same. And no difference between older and younger subgroups. Despite younger favoring faster, so younger athletes favored faster movements and older not favoring either velocity, okay, that leads us into the subgroup analysis. Also indicated that women favored faster training in comparison to men, probably because men are getting a bigger pump. Contrary to some previous reviews, these results indicate that chronic fast or traditional velocity resistance exercises increases muscular strength to a greater degree than ISVRE training. Okay, resistance training velocity must be considered if strength is a desired outcome. So if strength is a desired outcome, if we're focused on increasing the strength of our body, that in turn leads us to apply more force into an object. If we can then apply force into an object, if I put force into this, almost knocked my computer over. If I'm stronger, I could move this object, and in turn, that displays my strength. This is going to be a huge thing, especially in sports that are revolving around acceleration, sports that have an opponent, a body, like, you know, you're going up against a body, you're in weightlifting, obviously that's gonna matter if you can move things fast and heavy things fast, that's gonna play a major role. So if we can look at that and recognize that increasing strength is our goal. If that is our goal, then we've gotta focus on the speed of the movement, and that speed of the movement will transfer better over to that sporting world. This is stuff that I think we've got to factor in. I think one of the biggest takeaways here is like, okay, this is great. This meta-analysis is crazy. There's so much different content inside of this paper. All we've got to do is take it and say, you don't need to do intentionally slow concentric movements. You don't need to do it. I think there's some evidence that will show you if you're going through a controlled rep, and we have controlled eccentric strength, okay, here, and potentially even a pause here in the amortization phase, but then we drive as fast as possible on the way up, or we have the intent to drive as fast as possible, it shows that when strength is our focus, we've got to move things fast. So it's pretty easy. If you're using intentionally slow reps on the concentric, just stop using them. Just stop. Don't do it anymore. It's not favorable for strength. It's very likely also, because it's not going to be favorable for strength, it's also likely not favorable for hypertrophy either if you're thinking about size. So I would recommend completely throwing it out the window and just focus on the control of the eccentric, possibly on the control of the bottom position, and use that over time. But I think, for a while, I remember Charles Poliquin talking about the intent to move things fast is key. And a lot of people later would be like, oh no, you don't have to have the intent doesn't matter. But I actually think it does matter. I think the ability to apply a massive amount of force, the intent, the actual focus of your brain trying to recruit as quickly as possible will play a role in increasing strength. I think it plays a role in your overall coordination. I also believe it plays a role in that mind-muscle connection, which in turn should also lead to greater recruitment, leading to greater hypertrophy as well. So if hypertrophy is our goal, I'm going to jump to a conclusion here that I also think you should be focusing on moving things more aggressively. But also, if you're done with the research and you just want to become a freak, click on our main link, which is going to take you over to peakstrength.app. You can head over to peakstrength.app, download our strength training app so that you can start to become an absolute beast. The force velocity curve for dynamic constant external resistance contractions demonstrates that at very high levels of force production, velocity is low due to high external resistances. On the other end of the curve, force production is much lower due to lower external resistance, but velocity is much higher. Although this may lead to the interpretation that moving weight slowly leads to high levels of force production, this interpretation is erroneous. Velocity at the high force end of the force velocity curve is low due to external load, not intention. Despite relatively low movement velocities, the intention is to move the load as fast as possible. In addition, it should be noted that the velocity of movements at all points along the DCER force velocity curve are completed with maximal intention, which differs from purposely slow resistance training. Velocity manipulation, there you have it. Peace. Peace.